You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. Last week we were quite busy with the annual Women's Media Center Awards Gala, and it was fantastic. And you can catch up on articles about it and photographs of the event and the awardees on womensmediacenter.com. And while you're there, you can look at and download the latest Women's Media Center guide and report on the status of women in media. My guest today is a fortuitous event. We had scheduled her before I realized that it was Native American Heritage Month. So we're celebrating two things, because Joy Harjo, who is a friend and a fine poet, has been named the Poet Laureate of the United States, the first Native American Poet Laureate of the U.S. So it's especially and doubly fitting, by sheer coincidence, that she is our guest as we open Native American Heritage Month. And there's Surrealism Corner and all the other stuff, including Fighting Words. But first we need to go inside the headlines. Let's just start with saying good for you to the deep state, because apparently it's producing career professionals trying to do their job and respect the law. The diplomats, civil servants, even military men who defy Trump and testify before Congress and who actually seem to believe in the Constitution. What a notion. If we had a fist raised in the air award, this week's might go to the employees at Facebook. For the last few weeks, a message urging Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg to rethink their position on political advertising has been making waves inside the company. The text has been publicly visible on Facebook Workplace, an internal software program, and more than 250 employees have signed the message, which is a brave act. Here's a quote from the statement. "Free speech and paid speech are not the same thing. Misinformation affects us all. Our current policies on not fact-checking people in political office or those running for office are a threat to what Facebook stands for. We strongly object to this policy as it stands. It does not protect voices, but instead allows politicians to weaponize our platform by targeting people who believe that content posted by political figures is trustworthy." Over at Twitter, however, last Wednesday, CEO Jack Dorsey announced a ban on all advertisements about political candidates, elections, and hot-button policy issues like abortion and immigration, expressing growing concerns that politicians are seizing social media to deceive voters toward the 2020 election. Dorsey is, however, allowing Trump to continue to do his own thing on Twitter. Seems oxymoronic to me. And if there were a "Hang on, the rest of us are rooting for you" award, it would certainly go to Californians, who this week have suffered record fires, warranting the government to declare the entire state in a state of emergency, with the Weather Bureau, National Weather Bureau, issuing for the first time in the nation's history an extreme red alert. I have friends who were evacuated from their homes, now staying with friends or family in nearby states that also lack electricity due to so-called safety procedures taken by PG&E, the company whose greedy, faulty power lines are part of the problem in the first place. Those friends are away from home and don't even know if they have any homes to return to. Our heart goes to them as victims of climate change, still unacknowledged by the Trump regime. Speaking of which, Siberia is thawing so fast that extreme warming is warping the ground, devastating agriculture, and spurring an exodus of climate refugees. The permafrost that once sustained farming there is vanishing, leaving the region dotted with swamps, lakes, and weird bubbles of earth that render the land useless. Thousands are leaving the countryside for the regional capital and points beyond. So let's look around and see if there's any better news, specifically maybe affecting women, because we know women always have such a cushy, easy time when the whole species is suffering. Femicide, the killing of a woman or girl because of her sex, is certainly a global issue. A 2018 United Nations study reported 50,000 women and girls killed worldwide in 2017. But in France now, femicide is apparently reaching what feminist activists are calling epidemic proportions, with the murder of women by partners and former partners increasing, with 80% of victims murdered in their homes, and with authorities and police not taking the issue seriously. The French Minister of the Interior recorded 121 femicides in 2018. Each year, 220,000 French women are victims of domestic violence, and many cases go unreported. Spain has a more proactive approach, investing more than €1 billion into its anti-femicide program and establishing 100 special courts used exclusively for cases of sexual violence against women. In the, oh my God, where is the good news? Is there any good news department? Yes. 1. Most university students in Iceland are now women, as is the case in the U.S., but the gender difference there is really pronounced. For instance, at schools like the University of Akureyri, where 77% of the undergraduates are women. Icelandic women are also earning more graduate degrees. Number 2, Channel 4 in the United Kingdom is launching its first menopause policy in an effort to normalize the subject and make it no longer taboo. The policy will support employees experiencing such symptoms as hot flashes, anxiety, or fatigue, giving women access to flexible work arrangements and paid leave if they feel unwell because of side effects. This is so civilized. It's the first known among UK media companies to do this. It will also provide a private, cool, and quiet workspace, a workplace assessment to ensure that the environment is not worsening symptoms, and a range of support and guidance resources. Channel 4 hopes to end stigma around menopause by encouraging a better understanding of it among staff, including line managers. The channel's in-house gender equality staff network, calling itself 4 Women, is responsible for the policy. And, by the way, Alex Mahon, Channel 4's chief executive, is a woman. Bravo to Channel 4 in the United Kingdom. Listen up, media in the United States. 3. Back here at home, MSNBC has named 4 female journalists as moderators for the November debate of Democratic presidential candidates. Ashley Parker of The Washington Post, Rachel Maddow of MSNBC, Kristen Welker, NBC News' White House correspondent, and the Dean of Journalists, Andrea Mitchell, NBC News' Chief Foreign Affairs correspondent. Maybe we might get some questions about policies specifically affecting the female half of the population, although these policies ought to be noted as affecting everyone, like reproductive rights, including, of course, abortion, childcare, education, caregiving, environment, and yes, climate change. And last, let's do remember the good news that the impeachment process has begun, is happening, will continue to happen, and we are finally where they told us, and we feared, we'd never ever get to. So don't believe anybody telling you we won't get any farther. Onward, as a friend of mine signs her emails, onward. Time for our first break, but we have lots coming up, including conversation about poetry and art and politics and history. But first, we need to look into the surrealism corner. coming right up. Subscribe to this program on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. Follow us on Twitter at WMC Live, like our Facebook page at facebook.com/WMC Live, and visit us at WMCLive.com for more information about our show and our guests.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And here we have staggered from the Surrealism lobby through the Surrealism halls into the Surrealism corner. I want to start with some truly absurd but real statistics from the Women's Media Center Status of Women in the U.S. Media Report 2019. If you go to the website womensmediacenter.com, you can download it or any portion of it for free, and it will open your eyes, curl your hair, and stiffen your spine. Some of these statistics are just so incredible, still, in 2019, that they just scream to be in the Surrealism corner. For example, there are only 28% of women interpreting the elections on cable news programs, and just 4% of that number are women of color. So the next time you watch Joy Reid, don't think she can do everything all by herself, though if anybody could, she probably could. For that matter, women of color represent just 7.95% of the U.S. print newsroom staff and just 6.2% of local radio staff. And here's a sample from Hollywood. Of the top 1,200 top-grossing films, only 1 out of 1,335 directors was a Latina. In news, still, men dominate media across all platforms: TV, newspapers, online, and wires, writing, reporting, and delivering 63% of all stories. Men also account for 70% of guests on the top 5 Sunday morning news shows. Men snag 69% of news wire bylines, that's AP and Reuters, by far the biggest gender gap in news media. Just saying, surreal. Extra, read all about it. A Nepali climber has reached the summit of the world's 14 highest mountains in just over 6 months, setting a record for a feat that took other climbers years to complete. Nirmal Perja, age 36, achieved his mission proving, quote, anything is possible with determination, self-belief, and positivity, close quote. Now, this news bit really stopped me up. I grant readily that I am not the world's most athletic person. I never was, and the idea of climbing a steep hill while I love good views tuckers me out well before the doing of it. Mountains? I don't think so. Tall mountains? You must be joking. But I can, in the abstract, having a decent imagination, understand the drive to climb Annapurna or Everest or the world's tallest 14 peak mountains, the so-called 14 8,000ers, all of which are in the Himalaya and Karakoram ranges across China, India, Nepal, and Pakistan. They're all called 8,000ers because they're taller than 26,350 feet or 8,000 meters. Well, I can understand the drive to climb them for the reason cited by Edmund Hillary, who, following his Sherpa guide, Tenzing Norgay, was among the first to climb Everest. When he was asked why, he replied, because it is there. I can understand the women who climbed Everest and who climbed the other 8,000ers. What I cannot understand is the perspective of climbers in doing it fast. My mind boggles at the thought of sub-frigid temperatures for weeks on end, reconstituted meals hastily gulped, huddled in flimsy tents, wedged on slippery mountainsides in gale-force winds, crevices yawning to swallow me alive, terror of where I place each foot. Oh, yeah, and also only the thinnest of air to inhale. And there's the little matter of death waiting around every ledge, and a slip, and an avalanche, and a whiteout. Not to speak of the just discomfort. But I can understand the ecstasy that must await one on reaching the top. En route to and from Nepal, I flew over the Himalayas, and just the sight of their magnificence made me catch my breath with no thin air provoking it. But I cannot understand braving all these hazards while in a hurry. The previous speed record for climbing all 14 was held by a South Korean man who completed his climbs in 7 years, 10 months, and 6 days, while Normel Punja of Nepal did it in 6 months. What is the hurry, guys? Stop and smell the thin air. And the final item in today's Surrealism Corner is simply the photograph of Donald J. Trump's face in the box at a baseball game of the Washington Nationals while the crowd chanted, "Lock him up, lock him up, lock him up." That was not any longer a surreal dream of yours or mine. That was real, and he knew it. Time for our next break. But first, it occurs to me that we always discuss oppression in terms of the harm it causes to the oppressed, which is, of course, great harm. But the harm it causes to the oppressor in refusing to hear and relish what the oppressed have to contribute is another tragedy. If you doubt that, pay special attention to what's coming up. The Women's Media Center, founded in 2005 by Jane Fonda, Gloria Steinem, and myself, is a progressive, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization working to make women visible and powerful in media. You can learn more about the WMC at womensmediacenter.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
I'm so pleased that my guest for the conversation today is Joy Harjo, who was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma, of a Cherokee, French, and Irish mother, and a Muskogee Creek Native American father. She attended a Bureau of Indian Affairs boarding school in Santa Fe for high school, then the Institute for American Indian Arts, then the University of New Mexico. Multi-talented, she studied painting, fine arts, filmmaking, she wrote poems, and made music. She has taught at the Institute of American Indian Arts as well as at a number of universities and has been the recipient of numerous awards. She has written performance works in the genres of poetry and plays and released 5 CDs of her music, all of which won awards. She frequently tours as singer and musician with her group known as Aerodynamics. Aero is spelled A-R-R-O-W. She blogs, and she works as an activist to support women's rights and Native rights. In 2019, she was named United States Poet Laureate, the first Native American to be so appointed. My friend and sister, Joy Harjo. Joy, aptly named Dear Joy, welcome back to the program.
Well, I'm happy to be here after all these years.
Well, it's such a thrill is an overused word, but this time I really, really mean it. It's such a thrill that you've been named Poet Laureate of the United States.
Thank you so much. It certainly changed everything, but what's exciting about it is that it is a doorway, yet another doorway for Native peoples, for Native women, for poets who write the kind of poetry that I do. And for, we're at a crucial time in history, in earthliness, and being part of the earth, as well as political and spiritual. Of course, the spiritual threads through everything. That's ultimately what we are.
You have just come out with a brilliant new book as well, called An American Sunrise. I want you to read from them, please, in a little bit. But first, talk about the laureateship. Talk about what you intend to do with it, because it's a real hell of an important pulpit on which to raise consciousness and educate about poetry, about Native peoples, about women, all that. And I know you're planning to do that.
Yes. Well, I'm going to, for one, I'll be doing what I've been doing I realized the other day it's been 50 years. I started writing in my 20s, like my early to mid-20s, right when my daughter was born, right around that time. Around the time of Native rights movements, the feminist movement, and so on, with my poetry emerged, or the need to write, or the need to speak emerged during those times.
Right.
But, we find ourselves, this like the new book came out, it's interesting, the timing, but it was motivated, again, by going to our homelands, being in the homelands of the Muskogee Creek people, and seeing that, really witnessing the devastation, historical devastation, because we weren't there yet. Our stories are embedded there, and our origin stories. And so with this position, what just as this book does, I want to alert America to the history of this country, to the origin story of America, which is relatively a very, very young country, that, there's no America without indigenous, recognition of indigenous place and stories and poetry. And that we're still here. It might sound crazy, but there was a recent, a group called Illuminative did a recent study that had never been done about images of natives, and a large number of the American population believe that we're dead, that we are not here any longer, or that we're not human beings.
Oh my God.
So that's primary, but also we're in a time that's very similar to the times of Andrew Jackson and
yes,
where this kind of removal of Muskogee, many Native peoples, and it's similar to what's going on now with this current administration and the border and the dehumanization and calling out of the ugliness, very similar kind of time. So poetry is, with poetry, you go beyond words. You really have to. Poetry demands, whether you're writing it or reading it or speaking it, it demands that you listen. So what better tool during these times than poetry to gather people together? Yes,
exactly. And in the book, in An American Sunrise, you deal with that subject matter, not as political rhetoric, but as just heart-stinging lyricism, fire, and grief. The Trail of Tears. It's interesting because they're educated, non-indigenous, which is everybody, Americans think that they know. They're not so stupid as to think Indians don't exist anymore. Okay, well, they know that. But they don't, none of this is taught. On the contrary, it's buried. So they may have heard of removal of the Trail of Tears under Andrew Jackson, but I was just taking an informal survey, and these are good, activist, progressive, educated, well-meaning feminist people. No one knew that the vote, with all the furor about suffrage anniversary coming up next year for women, no one knew that Native women didn't get the vote until 1924, when Native men did. No one knew that it was as late as 1978 that the Religious Freedom Act permitted Native communities to worship in ways that they chose. 1978, in a country that was supposedly founded for religious freedom. Oh my God. And even the people who knew about the Trail of Tears and the forced removal didn't know the numbers. They thought it was like, I said, how many people do you think they had? 200, 300? They didn't know it was almost 25,000 people. So the fact that you have a horn now, not just your alto sax, but a bullhorn, a microphone, a pulpit, just to do some basic education, my God, is so valuable, Joy.
Yes, I'm tremendously aware of the responsibility, but also the placement of this, certainly in time, and what all of us have to stand up and speak and be and move,
Yeah, it's not just you. This is the responsibility of everybody. And it also is the history of this part of the world. I mean, it's embedded in that, even though it's been embedded so deeply that it's been buried. Can I prevail upon you to read some poems?
Yeah. Of course I will.
Oh, good. All right. Well, I have so many favorites, I can't even begin to start. But I know that I want to make time for Washing My Mother's Body. You went back to the original terrain in the southeast part of the United States, where the removal took place, where all the ancestors had been buried, where the mounds were, and you went back, and there are poems in An American Sunrise that just are unforgettable.
Okay, I'll read, let me see, A Refugee in the Smallest of Places. And this one was inspired again by thinking about what, I began with a quote, with several quotes, and one of them is from a survivor. He was a child on the Trail of Tears. And he said that James Scott, he was a Muskogee tribal elder, and he said, after our walk, there were no babies left. They killed the babies.
Yeah.
And this was in the early, mid-1800s. It wasn't that long ago. It wasn't that long ago. That generation is 7 generations. You have to watch it. Sevens are transformative. It's a transformative time, 7 years. It's a time of regeneration. And I realized, when I wrote my memoir, Crazy Brave, that I was 7 generations from my great-grandfather, 7 generations Menopause, who fought against Andrew Jackson, and the kind of thinking that would allow for the killing of babies walking across America while there's, New York was happening, all of this was going on, just like at the border now, where
exactly
it's the same, similar. So I wrote this thinking of that, called The Refuge in the Smallest of Places. And also the border, most of those people are native, and those are old migration trails that go north and south, and they were there long before any border.
Of course. Well, that Trump has a portrait of Jackson in the Oval Office. He made a special point of resurrect. Nobody wanted Jackson in the Oval Office before. Nobody wanted to remember even he'd been president, the, quote, Indian killer, unquote. But Trump resurrected it. Anyway. Well.
Yes. Someone sang for me and no one else could hear it. When I had given up and made knife marks on my arm or drank and gave myself away or was given. Someone sang for me and no one else could hear it. When demons came with rope and cages to take my children from me and imprison us. Someone sang for me and no one else could hear it. Now I am here in this timeless room of lost poetry, gathering up the destroyed and forgotten because of the song someone sang that no one else could hear but me. This book alternates between longer pieces and short pieces and historical moments. Granddaughters, I was a thought, a dream, a fish, a wing, and then a human being. When I emerged from my mother's river on my father's boat of potent fever, I carried a sack of dreams from a starlit dwelling to be opened when I begin bleeding. There's a red dress, deerskin moccasins, the taste of berries made of promises, while the memories shift in their skins at every moon to do their ripening. Break My Heart is an ars poetica. It's about writing poetry.
Yes.
And
it opens the book.
Yes, it does. Break my heart. There are always flowers, love cries, or blood. Someone is always leaving by exile, death, or heartbreak. The heart is a fist. It pockets prayer or holds rage. It's a timekeeper, music maker, or backstreet truth teller. Baby, 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 you can't say what's been said before, though even words are creatures of habit. You cannot force poetry with a ruler or jail it at a desk. Mystery is blind, but wills you to untie the cloth in eternity. Police with their guns cannot enter here to move us off our lands. History will always find you and wrap you in its 1,000 arms. Someone will lift from the earth without wings. Another will fall from the sky through the knots of a tree. Chaos is primordial. All words have roots here. You will never sleep again, though you will never stop dreaming. The end can only follow the beginning, and it will zigzag through time, governments, and lovers. Be who you are, even if it kills you, and it will, over and over again, even as you live. Break my heart, why don't you?
Take a word or two, take a moment or two and talk about the way that music informs your work. Rita did that, Rita Dove, and I know that that's true of you as a musician as well, and that you sometimes play in your readings and vice versa. Talk about that for a moment.
Yes, I've always loved music, and I came to poetry really through music, through my mother and her love of poetry and music, and she was a songwriter until she had 4 children. The weight of having to care for 4 children, essentially alone, took that away. And so I love music. I was always called on to sing at school, and in 5th grade, I guess there was band at 5th and 6th grade. I got a clarinet. And then when I was 16, I went to junior high, and the band teacher said, girls can't play sax, because I wanted to play saxophone. And then around the same time, my stepfather forbid me from singing in the house. And so I walked away from music and didn't pick up a horn until I was almost 40. And then the horn brought me back to singing. But it's always been the root of the poetry, because I've always heard the music when I write. I always hear the music.
I always love the idea also that the Poet Laureate of the United States plays a mean horn. It's just something so delicious about that. Well, I know that you're on a book tour, and you will be touring for much of this year as laureate. If people want to get to a reading, where can they find that? On your website, on the Poet Laureate website?
Probably on mine. We just launched a new website that will have all the dates.
Okay, and that's joyharjo.com?
Uh-huh.
Okay. I desperately want you to read Washing My Mother's Body, please.
Okay, I will read this. And this poem, I don't know what I'm going to do. Right. I can have an idea, or maybe even a kind of assignment, but I go towards it not knowing anything, and that's how I find out things. And then what this poem taught me is that you can, with words, you can, with poetry, go back and, we all have maybe something we regret or something that haunts us that we wanted to do. You can go back in a poem and rewrite that. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to wash my mother's body. I had never seen it done, particularly in my family, because the industry, anymore, it takes away those sacred moments, whether it's birth or death. And so I went back. I didn't even know this poem was coming, and I sat down to write. I was in another mode, and it just, the first draft, of course, I rewrite a lot.
Me too.
But this first draft, this first draft just poured out. It surprised me, and I thought, whoa, thank you. It was what I needed to know.
It's a fine, fine poem.
So this is called Washing My Mother's Body. I never got to wash my mother's body when she died. I return to take care of her in memory. That's how I make peace when things are left undone. I go back and open the door. I step in to make my ritual, to do what should have been done, what needs to be fixed so that my spirit can move on, so that the children and grandchildren are not caught in a knot of regret they do not understand. I find the white enamel pan she used for bread and biscuits. It's the same pan she used to bathe us when we were babies. I turn the faucet on and hold my hand under the water until it is warm, the temperature one uses to wash an infant. I find a clean washcloth in a stack of washcloths. She had nothing in her childhood. She made sure she had plenty of everything when she grew up and made her own life. Her closets were full of pretty dresses, so many she had not time to wear them all. They were bought by the young girl who wore the same flour sack dress to school every day, the one she had to wash out every night and hang up to dry near the wood stove. I pick up the bar of soap from her sink, the same soap she used yesterday morning to wash her face. When she looked in the mirror, did she know it would be her last sunrise? I move over pill bottles, a clock radio on the table by the bed, a pen, and set down the pan. I straighten the blankets over her to keep her warm, for dignity. I start with her face. Her face is unlined even 2 months before her 80th birthday. She was known for her beauty, and when younger, passed for the Cherokee that she was through her mother and her mother's mother, all the way back to time's beginning. My mother had the iron pot given to her by her Cherokee mother, whose mother gave it to her, given to her by the U.S. government on the Trail of Tears. She grew flowers in it. As I wash my mother's face, I tell her how beautiful she is, how brave, how her beauty and bravery live on in her grandchildren. Her face is relaxed, peaceful. Her earth memory body has not left yet. But when I see her the next day embalmed in the casket in the funeral home, it will be gone. Where does it go? It is heavier than the spirit who lifted up and flew. I think of it making the rounds to every place it has loved to say goodbye. Goodbye to the house where I brought my babies home, she sings. Goodbye to June's bar where I was the shuffleboard queen. I cannot say goodbye yet. I will never say goodbye. I lift up each arm to wash. Her hands still wear her favorite rings. She loved her body and decorated it with shiny jewelry, with creams and makeups. I am tender over that burn scar on her arm from when she cooked at the place with the cruel boss who insisted she reach her hand into the fryolator to clean it. She had protested it was still hot and suffered a deep burn. That scar always reminded me of her coming in from working long hours in restaurants, her uniform drenched with sweat, determination, and exhaustion. Once she came home and I was burning up with a fever. She pulled out the same pan I am dipping the washcloth in now, only she added rubbing alcohol to bring the fever down. She washes tenderly, tells me about how her friend Chunky left her husband again, how she knew her old boss, a Jewish woman who treated her kindly, has cancer. She doesn't know how she knows. She just knows. She doesn't tell me that. I find it in a journal she has left me, a day book in which she has written notes for me to find when she is gone. I wash her neck and lift the blankets to move down her heart. I thank her body for carrying us through the rough story, through the violence of my father and her second husband. Her mother's mother died when she was young, and her adoptive mother, another Cherokee woman, had no love in her heart for a tiny girl whose light hair betrayed her Indianness, unlike the baby's older, darker sister who would stay within their circle. Because her mother was not there for her, my grandmother did not know how to mother my mother. The story is all there in her body as I wash her to prepare her to be let down into earth and return all stories to the earth. My body memories rise up as I wash. I recall carrying my 2 children, rocking them, and feeding them from my body. How I knew myself as beloved earth in that body. I uncover my mother's legs. I remember the varicose veins that swelled like rivers when my mother would get off a long shift of standing and cooking. They carried more than a woman should carry. A woman should be honored like the queen. Traditionally, we treated our women with that kind of respect, my Creek husband tells me. Ha, I laugh and ask him, then why aren't you cooking my dinner? I wash her feet, caress them. You'll have some rest now, I tell my mother, even as I know my mother was never one for resting. I cover her. I make the final ring of the washcloth and drape it over the pan. I brush my mother's hair and kiss her forehead. I ask the keepers of the journey to make sure her travel is safe and sure. I ask the angels whom she loved and with whom she spoke frequently to take her home, but wait, not before I find her favorite perfume. Then I sing her favorite song softly. I don't know the name of the song, just a few phrases. One of those old homemade heartbreak songs where there's a moment of happiness wound through. And then I let her go.
Thank you. The book is called An American Sunrise, Poems by Joy Harjo, the Poet Laureate of the United States, the first Native Poet Laureate, Joy Harjo. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Robin.
One last final break, and then I'll return with some fighting words.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, it's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Talk radio with a brain.
Compare and contrast can also be fighting words. You've probably heard that freshwoman Democrat from California, Katie Hill, age 32, who had campaigned as the most millennial candidate ever and who had flipped her suburban Los Angeles district to blue, announced her resignation after less than 10 months in office. She was facing an ethics investigation triggered by a right-wing website, Red State, which published reports that she'd been intimately involved with her legislative director, which she strongly denied, and also separately in a three-way sexual relationship with a young campaign aide and Hill's estranged husband, Kenny Heslop, which she acknowledged. Heslop had given private photos of personal moments to a tabloid without Hill's consent after she commenced divorce proceedings. The young, now former Congresswoman stated that her resignation needed to happen, quote, so that the good people who supported me will no longer be subjected to the pain inflicted by my abusive husband and the brutality of hateful political operatives, close quote. For a first-termer, she was already a rising star, chosen for the freshman class in House leadership and serving as vice chair of the House Oversight and Reform Committee, which is an unusually high-ranking position for a backbencher. Nancy Pelosi referred to Hill as having a strategic mind and showing enormous promise. Compare and contrast. The commentators went into a spin. The first female legislator to fall under the Me Too-influenced new House anti-sexual harassment rules. Sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. Even if it was in the campaign and not in the House, and even if it was all consensual, the employer-employee relationship has the implicit taint of coercion. Wait, no, isn't it just revenge porn? She should be held accountable. Wait, Hill herself said the relationship with the campaign aide was inappropriate, but, quote, I still allowed it to happen despite my better judgment. I'm so sorry, close quote. Wait, no, would we let Harvey Weinstein off by saying that? But she's not trying to be let off. Is she a lesbian? Is she bisexual? Maybe it's all about homophobia. How could she have been so stupid/undisciplined/crazy? Yet there was a distinctive shift in some of the coverage. Two writers, Molly Roberts of the Washington Post and Lisa Lehrer of the New York Times, were among those who reported the story with both eyes open and no patriarchal squint, that is, with what some would call feminist views, and I would call 20/20 vision. Roberts noted that the estranged husband stands in a long line of jilted men charging their exes with promiscuity, writing that, quote, the propaganda outlets and peeping Tom tabloids dressed up as newsmakers who helped him have always been proud participants in weaponizing women's sexuality against them. Just as crucially, many of the same men are eager to smear a woman as a slut, even as they're gawking, close quote. And Lehrer put the story in context, citing the many men who have been accused of far worse and stayed in office, focusing in particular on Representative Duncan Hunter, Republican of California, whose district is a little over 100 miles south of Hill's district, who has been accused of having intimate relationships with his staffers, plural, and is facing criminal charges for stealing campaign funds to pay for his dates with them, but who, far from resigning, has borrowed his boss Trump's style by attacking the federal indictment as fake news and a rigged witch hunt, and who is running for re-election. Roberts and Lehrer's voices are part of a hard-won, welcome shift in more nuanced coverage of a story that is unfortunate on many levels, some of which even overlap. Part of the judgmentalism coming down on Katie Hill is generational, but most of it is sexist. Her having to resign is being accountable, but at the same time it is also a result of being the victim of slut-shaming. The technology is a culprit, too, one we're still learning to navigate. The exhibitionist's culture, unearthed or spawned by that technology, wherein one leaves a public visual trail of private behavior lifelong, and lots of folks are apparently just fine with that, is also responsible. It could be argued that someone as strategically sharp as Hill ought to have recognized this, especially since she was running for office. Then again, perhaps she participated in the three-way relationship under pressure from the abusive husband, a dynamic that I have witnessed in my own life and that of other women. As for the exhibitionist culture, unlike Anthony Weiner, it wasn't Hill who sent out the photos. You know, personally, I am totally uninterested in photos of people nude, or for that matter, of what they ate for dinner or their new boots, nor would I foist showing mine on you. This may be a sign of age on my part or a sign of intelligence. I don't know, and I'm not even running for office, and never planned to. There's one aspect of the story I haven't seen analyzed in any real depth, and actually it's the core of what happened. Although such so-called exposés evoke prurient interest, they're never really about sex, any more than sexual harassment or sexual assault are about sex. They're about power. Power inherent in an employer-employee relationship? Yes, but also other kinds of power, sometimes simultaneous, sometimes parallel, sometimes overlapping. Compare and contrast. Power wielded by the online and print tabloid world, some of whom we've learned are financially in bed with Trump and the right wing. Power of the online far right, unchecked and enabled by Facebook. Power of Katie Hill's abusive husband, who first gave the private photos to the Daily Mail in an attempt to destroy his estranged wife who was divorcing him. These are different, sometimes conflicting, sometimes collaborating kinds of power, all in movement, jockeying for the winning position. Furthermore, our attitudes about sexuality, women's sexuality in particular, are still such a boiling stew of confusions, shifts, myths, rules, fears, lies, pressures, and assumptions that for a female human being trying to live a sexually healthy, affirmative, joyful life, harming no one, that can become an operatic achievement when it ought to be the norm. Katie Hill says that she'll pursue legal action about the photos and that she's going to spend her time now fighting revenge porn as one of the worst things that can happen to women. I'm not sure whether she was right to step down or whether she should have stayed and fought, but I respect her decision, and I certainly wish her well. Ironically, she might turn out to be more effective out of office than in. Then she would have come into her own power at last. Those are my fighting words. Add yours on Twitter, and remember to tag us at WMC Live and use the hashtag #FightingWords. And that's our show for this week. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and now Instagram at @TheRobinMorgan, and you can check out my blog at robinmorgan.net and find my latest book of poems, Dark Matter, and my brand new novel, Parallax, wherever books are sold. Opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the Women's Media Center. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Executive producer as well as founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. WMC president and co-executive producer of this program, Julie Burton. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Join us again next time on Women's Media Center Live.